This is pretty interesting. Ben Shapiro has been losing a lot of support recently because of his views on Israel's onslaught in Gaza, and especially recently because of his critique of Tucker Carlson hosting Nick Fuentes on his show. These are just some channel stats over the past month. You can see he's been declining in views and subscriber count, and it just goes on. Here's just some more stats. On social media, a lot of people are attributing this because of, like I said, him interviewing far-right activist Nick Fuentes. This is coming from X. Ben Shapiro's YouTube channel dropped subscribers after his feud with Tucker Carlson. Ben Shapiro's YouTube has declined from 7.22 million, losing 10,000. The stats I showed you showed he lost about 40,000. The feud highlights growing divisions among conservative media over Israel anti-Semitism and platform boundaries, with reactions on X ranging from support of Ben Shapiro's pro-Israel stance to criticism of his positions. Now, of course, what's important here is not too much about Ben Shapiro's channel stats. Everybody's channel stats fluctuate, and ultimately, that's not that interesting of a story. But what is interesting is seeing how the conservative right is starting to shift on Israel, and how Ben Shapiro's stance on Israel is starting to really upset a lot of people and turning them to other channels and platforms like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, and especially among the Gen Z white men, like channels like Nick Fuentes. We can just read a few of the comments here, and I have a few more things to show you. They don't realize how fucked they are, coming from somebody posting here. This is a microscopic price to pay for holding onto your soul. So it seems like somebody here is in support of it. You can only imagine how many of the Daily Wire's paid subscribers are canceling their subscriptions now. People don't ever want to watch Ben Shapiro for free. They can't debate him because he refuses to debate. And then again, we have somebody, it looks like they have an Israeli account here, at least in Hebrew. The price you pay for being a truth teller amongst the Viper's den. I'm sure he's not losing sleep. Here's another one that seems like they're in support. Arjen Wexler. You can tell who actually believes in God and good by their choice of by their responses to this. So again, like I said, it really just depends on a lot of people that are still very pro-Israel might have a different opinion. But what's so interesting more than anything is just taking a step back and looking at some of the things Ben Shapiro has said, especially the past year, that's alienated a lot of people and are making people question, why does Ben Shapiro have this stance? Is he really America first, or is he placing the interests of Israel above America? This post has went viral recently. I'm not sure if anybody has seen it before, where Ben Shapiro back in 2004, 2005 wrote an article titled "Why War in Iraq is Good for America." And that article has been going viral again, especially recently, because people are starting to question why in the hell would Ben Shapiro advocate for a war in Iraq. And here's the article right here. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here as well for you guys to see. It's a pretty shocking article that somebody would even consider writing. And then I have another one that I wanted to share that's even more shocking. Let's see there. There it is. Why war in Iraq is good for America. Let me just go ahead and edit that. There we go. By Ben Shapiro. This was on August 11th of 2005. It is now clear that the war in Iraq is unpopular. For pretty obvious reasons, it's unpopular, but apparently, according to Ben, back in 2005, that's not the case. Let me make this reading a bit more clear for you guys. 53% of Americans, this was a poll must have been conducted back in 2005, of Americans felt that sending troops to Iraq was not a mistake. Interesting. This week, 54% of Americans believe that it was. According to a USA Today poll 2 months ago, only 39% of Americans believe that war in Iraq had made us less safe from terrorism. This week, 57% stated that the war has made us less safe. President Bush has garnered the lion's share of criticism for the situation in Iraq. A full 61% of those polled by Newsweek think Bush is handling the war in Iraq badly. 50% stated that America is losing ground in its efforts to establish democracy in Iraq. And it goes on with 48% of Americans agreeing that the president is honest and 50% of disagreeing. Now, of course, we know that President Bush was very much so lying about the war in Iraq. The entire propaganda to elicit the United States and push the United States to go into war was based on false intel that Iraq and Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Of course, we know that was definitely not the case. And not only was that not the case, but they lied, and they knew they lied. We also previously have heard Donald Trump even say that publicly, that they knew there were no weapons of mass destruction and they lied. So the article goes on and it just shows a bit more polls here that he's sharing. Charges of high-handedness are also sticking. 56% of those polled say President Bush is arrogant. And let's just see here where he starts to now support this. But something deeper is at work here. Americans are impatient isolationists at heart. We don't want to be the world's policemen. Gaining Iraqis their freedom, as good as it sounds, isn't enough of justification for war. China is a dictatorship, goes on and on and on. And so we begin to wonder, was it worth it in Iraq? Without proof of weapons of mass destruction, can we be sure that Saddam Hussein has endangered our security? After all, Iraq didn't attack us, Al-Qaeda has. And it goes on, and then it talks about the suffering of casualties that America have endured over World War I and World War II. But now America faces a crossroads. Since the death of the Soviet Union, we are unquestionably the world's only superpower. The world's remaining empire. Acquiring an empire requires a different mindset than maintaining and expanding one. Empires either decline or they grow. If America is to survive and flourish, Americans must realize that the empire isn't a choice, it's a duty. And apparently, the duty of maintaining the American empire is to continue wars in Iraq and the Middle East and bombing Middle Eastern countries for Israel's security. No one said empire was easy, but it is right and good, both for Americans and for the world. Forwarding freedom isn't always important, but it is especially important where doing so ensures America's future security, as in Iraq. Maintaining Americans' empire will require Americans to recognize the dangers of impatient isolationism. So it's been 20 years now since Ben wrote that article. What do you think? Do you think that apparently impatient isolationism has been bad for America? Or if we use a little bit more of that, do you think it would have been good for America? After the war in Iraq, of course, America then went ahead and backed the NATO bombings or the NATO airstrikes that overthrew Gaddafi. Very recently, Bashar al-Assad of Syria has been toppled over. Of course, that was because of American influence and American backing of the rebels in Syria, continuously arming them over time. Barack Obama, during his own presidency, Operation Timber Sycamore was going on in the CIA back in 2012, where the CIA was actually training Al-Qaeda detainees in the Middle East, in Syria, and training them with weapons to have them go out and try to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. That didn't work for about 10 years or more until Bashar al-Assad was overthrown just within the past 2 years here, past year. So this is the kind of thing that somebody like Ben Shapiro has been consistently advocating for, is going to war, which ended up putting trillions of dollars of debt on America. And the only country that really seems to benefit from these endeavors has been Israel. And then when there are actual things that matter to Americans and that matter to America's history, Ben Shapiro seems to downplay that. One of the most shocking things that Ben Shapiro has said very recently is that he doesn't care who killed John F. Kennedy. That was probably one of the most shocking statements that he's recently made. And many people were wondering, why would Ben Shapiro say such a thing? Let me go ahead and play that as well, because it shocked Americans. It got millions of views. I don't care who killed JFK. And it's like, why would somebody with such a large platform say something so despicable? Well, apparently for Ben Shapiro, John F. Kennedy's assassination was in 1963. And, it's not 1963 anymore. So that doesn't matter to him. Here's the video, actually. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen for something that I previously made, quote tweeting that. And here it is. Let me just share my tab and see if you guys see it. There we go.
Which is, I don't care who killed JFK. I mean, I do. I don't care who killed JFK. I mean, I do, because it's really interesting. But I noticed that the calendar says 2025, and he was killed in 1963. And so my opinion about who killed JFK has about as much relevance as who killed William McKinley, or James Garfield, which is to say, not an enormous amount.
So what's so funny about this is that John F. Kennedy's assassination was in 1963, and he says it was so long ago. However, the Holocaust was back in the 40s. And Ben Shapiro seems to bring that up a lot. So it seems that if it's something that affects him directly or affects his identity directly, then he definitely cares, regardless of how long ago it was. But if it was something like JFK's assassination, which most Americans, every American should really care about, considering it had such a detrimental and consequential impact on the United States, that's something he really doesn't care about. And he only finds it interesting. But aside from that, it doesn't really matter to him. So that's the kind of individual that's been losing popularity recently, and a lot of it is because people are starting to question what's his ulterior motives. Is it because he's promoting the interests of a foreign country, or because he actually cares about America? So we'll just go ahead and go through some of the comments now. Also, if you haven't clicked the subscribe button yet, would appreciate the support. Let's see here. Trump doesn't want to think about anything positive or show any doubt. Much of the expenses of success. The sheep that are groomed and planted. Politics is the new religion in America, the greatest country on Jesus' earth. If you think the Democratic Party isn't part of the political machine, you're nuts. Especially when I'm from Michigan and all Zionists are Dems. You're completely correct, Bart Sim. It's definitely affecting both sides of the aisle. Wally, have Zazik on. You'd be great interviewing him. Not sure who he is, but you could definitely send me his contact. Trudeau was a Zionist, pushes for vaccine and culture wars. It matters enormously in regards to JFK's assassination. I believe you're mentioning. What's it say? Israel says, "Oh yeah, never forget when it comes to things they want people to remember." The GOP has a very greedy and outdated political philosophy. I would also say the Democrats, what I've noticed, especially over the past couple of years since October 7th, is really the Democrats and the GOP are both wings of the same bird. Good morning, Rashid. Hope you have a wonderful day ahead. Thanks, Veronica. You as well. So that's everything I really wanted to share for this video. Would appreciate it if you guys click the subscribe button below, and also super chats really help my platform and help me keep making videos for you guys. So would appreciate the support. Otherwise, I will